Why can't we deploy our own navy much better than we are doing? Why, if the French, let's be honest, aren't really going to do much about this, and they just aren't really, so why can't we have our own navy in there doing that job for them? And even if it means us going into French waters every now and again, I mean, they're not going to start shooting at us, are they?
So, Patrick, how do you do that then? What exactly are you proposing?
More boats, more military. The 53 million that we've been spending on giving to the French, why can't we spend that on our own people? Why can't we have our own border security? Why can't we have more of our boats in the channel? Because these dinghies we're talking about
what do those boats do?
Okay, those boats can tow those other boats back, can't they?
To where?
France.
How do you land in France? How do you land in France
without
permission
try it
from
on.
the
I
French?
don't think they'd give it back to us. They absolutely
wouldn't.
wouldn't.
How do you land in France if you do not have permission to land in France? You cannot do it. This is the problem.
If you just start doing it, what are the French going to do about that? Because at the end of the day, we're paying for this stuff and they're not actually adhering to it. So they've broken their rules. We'll start sticking to the rules when they start sticking to the rules. Or we could have some kind of offshore processing centre. If you propose that,
it's a great idea.
If it's a great idea, if you propose it, you'd get loads of votes.
Patrick, it's a great idea. What would you do if you were the British government if the French decided to export a lot of their migrants and land them on the beaches in Sussex?
Well, I'd like to think that I'd be able to run a border policy that would not allow that to happen.
How?
Well, because I'd do the things that I'd promised.
Tell me how.
Okay, you know what, actually?
No,
it's not my job to tell you how to say it. No, Tim, you need to stop here, because it's not my job. It's your party that promised to stop this. It's your party, it's your Home Secretary who said that currently, right now, today, this would not be happening. And we had a record day 2 days ago. So don't ask me for the answers. Why don't you come out with the answers? You're on the Home Affairs Committee, for goodness sake.
Right. So I'm asking you, practically, what do we do when the French will not abide by the rules and will not take its own responsibilities seriously? I would love it, whether it gains votes or not, for us to be able to pick up those migrant boats that are on British territorial waters with Border Force, the Coast Guard, or whoever, and take them straight back to Calais or wherever they came from in France and land them there. And that was my solution. I said that if the French were to do that, it would cut off that trade stone dead, because people would not be paying up money if they knew that there was a 99% chance they're going to be picked up and taken back to where they started from. We cannot go on to French sovereign territory, whether you would like to or I would like to.
Why can't we have an offshore processing station then? An offshore processing station, so they never actually set foot onto this country, because once they do,
that is one option that the Home Secretary has put forward. So there are two things going forward. Yesterday, we passed the Border and Nationalities and Borders Bill, which is still a long way to go through Parliament, but it got a majority because I and other Conservative MPs voted for it, because that's what we had in our manifesto and that's what our constituents want, that said that people coming across the Channel now will be committing a criminal offence, and when they are picked up, can be put in jail. And if they then try to apply... and which we then pay for. Right. Again, it's still our problem. And if they then try to apply for asylum, their case would be hugely weakened because they hadn't gone about it the right way. The problem is those people are still on British territory. We've still got to then be able to return them somewhere, and that's when we get into a problem. Okay. That's one thing that we want to happen, is going through Parliament. The other thing is, could we have an offshore processing centre, as Australia has done, fraught with problems, but it's possible.
Okay, why can't we have the best military in the world, the best trained military in the world? The SAS are, I think, by all accounts, almost undeniably probably the best at what they do. Why can't we go and cut the head off this snake and go and find these people running the people smuggling gangs and get rid of them?
We're doing that already, and 150 have been put in prison already. But that's not nearly enough, because there's another 150 that appear. This is big business. So one thing that has been done, we're cooperating with the French. So we have got Scotland Yard and we've got some security service people working alongside the French on joint intelligence and patrols and things like that. We've got British military grade drones, as I've said. It's very hard to buy a dinghy around Calais now. We've sort of closed off that route. So what's happening? These criminal gangs are bringing in boats from Germany and from other countries as well. This has become really big business. That's what we're up against. 150, I think, in the last year of these people smugglers on either side of the Channel, were apprehended, were arrested, and were charged and are in jail. That's a good start, but this is a huge business. Look, I think you and I would like to be able to do the same things. You and I and my constituents would like to achieve the same things. But in a real world, we cannot, alas, pick up people in the Channel and dump them back in France unless France allows us to do that. What we need is for France to adhere by international maritime law, which we said they can, by picking these people up and taking them back to France, and that stops it. That's where the problem is. Don't blame our Home Secretary, don't blame our government, blame the French, because that's where the fault really lies.
Well, okay, I do blame the French. I've actually dished it out.
Good,
the French
we're making progress.
Well, no, we're not making progress. I think that's quite condescending, because I do also blame you, and I do also blame this government. I do also blame the Home Secretary.
But tell me what practically we could do, because you haven't, because we cannot invade France.
Well, we can't invade France.
You're suggesting we invade France.
You know what we could do? We could be better at diplomacy and better at politics, which is your job, because if we're paying the French 54 million quid of taxpayers' money, I expect them to do something about it. And the failure for them to do it is, yes, okay, maybe a bit of French arrogance, but the fact that you lot clearly aren't that good at politics and you aren't that good at international relations. Because if you were, I told you at the outset, able to sort it out. That's diplomacy.
I told you at the outset.
That's
I don't
diplomacy.
think we should be. I told you at the outset. I don't think we should be paying them 54 million on the basis they didn't do much good with the last 31.8 million.
Would you take these measures further? COVID passports, would that work? Vaccinating kids 12 years of age and over, would you do that too, Bill?
I think vaccinations for under 18s absolutely has to be considered. I've got a 17-year-old son. We can't get him vaccinated. He goes out to work. It's a real worry for us.
Yeah. He's got almost zero chance of anything happening to him. You must know that as well.
Well, I don't accept that, Ian, because you've got evidence that people of all ages can become ill,
yes,
and can get this so-called long COVID. And
you could, but I mean, you could get that. Hang on a minute.
Let's just finish. No, you can't just get it with any virus. It's not true with flu and things like that, or colds.
You can die of flu.
Long COVID is a very real. Long COVID is a very real problem. We already have hundreds of thousands of people with it. I know some friends of mine who have it, and they've been ill for months, indeed some going right back to the start of the pandemic. It's a serious problem that is often overlooked about the damage that's done to major organs.
I get that. I get it.
And I do think we need to take it much more seriously and be much more careful.
But it wouldn't necessarily stop you getting that if you had the jab, of course, as we know. And the risks are...
No, it reduces the likelihood. I mean, having double jabs is absolutely the right thing to be doing.
Okay.
But we need to carry on, and we need to get it into children as well as to young adults who haven't had it so far.
So even though that statistically there's almost no chance of, if you do get it, that anything's going to happen to you, you should still medicate those people with 2 jabs, despite the fact that they are pretty much, I don't want to use the word immune, but as close as you can get from any serious effect if they get COVID. I mean, some people might scratch their head, Bill, and think, that's a strange way to dispense medicine.
I'm really not following your argument at the moment, to be honest. Look, I think...
Well, if there's nothing wrong with you and you're not going to get ill, why do you need double jabbing?
Well, because it's not quite as simple as that. That's not how vaccines work, is it?
But statistically, you're
the
not
vaccine gives you a lot of good protection, doesn't it? It gives you protection. It doesn't make you entirely
But lots, if I don't drive my car, I
immune.
won't have a car crash. Well, I mean, there's lots of things you can do to better protect yourself in life. It's whether you need medication, a pharmaceutical product put into you, when the chances of anything happening to you are almost zero. And I think that's the concern many people have, and many parents have as well.
Well, I think there's plenty of evidence that children can get ill, can get long COVID, even if it's not as serious as for other people. And of course, it's not just about the children themselves. It's about the fact that they can pass it on to other people who are more vulnerable. I mean, 3.7 million clinically vulnerable people, as we've talked about already, is a very, very significant problem. And they are extremely worried, given the reckless way the government has lifted all the restrictions in one go.
And just a final point then on that thing of COVID passports, what is the Labour position on that? Would you like to see that no jab, no job, all of that goes with it? You can't go shopping, you can't go on holiday, you can't go to a pub without your passport?
Well, we certainly need to see a system operating that enables the economy to be open while we keep people safe. And however that is operated, we need to make sure that there is the right balance struck between keeping people safe by maintaining public health measures and also enabling the economy to reopen. That has to be the way forward. It's happened in a big bang. That's going to cause problems. I fear, from what the scientists are saying, we're going to see infections going through the roof. And frankly, when you've got the Prime Minister and Chancellor behaving the way they did, thinking they're better than everybody else, showing how arrogant they are, how out of touch they are, there is this danger of chaos and confusion continuing right across the economy and through public health too.
Okay.
They think it's one rule for them and one rule for everybody else.
Yep,
I think we need to do better than it.
Listen, okay, Bill, we got it. We hear it. Thank you.
You're on the programme to talk about this. You are the Director of Policy and Advocacy at Freedom from Torture. Nobody coming over in those boats in the last few days, and I live near there. They're young men, basically, young men in their 20s, 30s, maybe even a little older. They're coming over here. They look reasonably fit when they've got off the boats. They're not fleeing any terror in France. This is a small island. We have left, I'm so glad we've left the European Union. And the majority of people in this country, if you were to ask them, don't want any more people coming into this country illegally. They are like burglars coming into your house, Mr. Crawshaw, and you should surely be talking against it.
It's funny you say. I mean, actually, the polling shows the opposite. That the majority of people in this
Can we not talk about polling on this programme? Because polling doesn't show anything. Polling is just something that people want.
It tells us things.
No,
it tells us more than just...
It doesn't tell you anything.
You said yourself they choose to come here, because their family are here or they like it here. I mean, it's not really a lot. They're fleeing. They want to come here out of choice. It's not a fleeing their life situation.
Back at the starting point, I mean, so the largest number of people coming across the channel is from Iran. Horrific situation.
No, we're not talking. Don't forget the starting point. Yeah, they've passed that along, so it's gone, the starting point. They're in the safe land. They've been through about 5 safe countries.
But do we need to define it so that every other country has to...
Yes, we do.
Well,
be generous, but not us. We've always said we wanted to be generous. So my colleague, for example...
No, we don't want to be generous anymore, Mr. Crawshaw. We've been generous enough. Generous to a fault.
Except when you actually meet the people who've been through this, I know that you would say it differently. So my colleague...
I have met people, and I'm not saying it differently. No, because if
he's been honoured by the Queen. I'll just finish.
I don't care.
He was honoured by the Queen.
This has got nothing to do with it. Doesn't matter.
What to come to this country now,
doesn't matter.
He will be locked up.
Doesn't matter.
So why is the person who's been honoured by the Queen not allowed to flee torture?
He's perfectly allowed to get out, and he's perfectly allowed to apply to come to this country legally. A lot of people come here legally, and we love those people come here.
Lots of people who get honoured by the Queen go to prison.
No, I'm sure you know that. I'm sure you know that. Actually, it's tiny numbers who...
Hello?
If they were to increase the numbers and to make it possible, it would be absolutely great. But the fact is that organised things, there will always be people who are simply fleeing for their lives and have different circumstances.
But these are not people who are fleeing for their lives. These are people who can afford to pay thousands of pounds to people smugglers to get over here, and we are being too soft. We should tell the French we're not taking any more, and we should have our patrol boats out in the Channel, and we should send them back without any more fuss.
I think it's the least British thing I can think of to suggest that everybody else needs to...
You're not talking for me, Mr. Crawshaw. Who do you think you're talking for? Who are you talking for?
I think I'm talking for the majority. I mean, that's absolutely clear. Everything shows that the majority of Britons wish to be decent and compassionate.
Only the people you talk to.
But this isn't decent and compassionate, these people.
Well, I know you don't like polling, but it's the only scientific thing that we have.
Polling is not scientific, by the way. There's nothing scientific about polling. That's a ridiculous thing to say.
I hear that you don't like it, but it's as scientific as we've got.
It's not scientific.
People are asked and they give a very clear response. And I think, to be honest, leaving aside the polling, I think that's instinctive to all of us. We know perfectly well that people are instinctively generous. If they see somebody suffering, they want to step up. So the argument you're making is these people are not really suffering. And I've no idea how you reach that conclusion.
Because they're in France and Italy and all through Europe. They're not suffering.
I've actually been to the coast and watched some of these people coming out of the boat because I live near there. And I've actually seen how fit they seem to be. When were you last around Dover and the south coast when they came ashore?
Yeah, I mean...
When were you last at the coast and saw them coming ashore? No, you haven't been, have you?
Yeah, but you
haven't been.
When you last talk to somebody who's described to you... I have been, yes. More to the point is that you yourself, I feel, have never talked to any of the people who have made those
Don't
journeys,
patronise me, Mr. Crawshaw.
I have talked to people who.
I don't like being patronised by people like you. It annoys
Well, if
me
you tell me
intently.
I've talked to people who flee for their lives, and they don't care where they go. The first country they get and they're free, they're over the moon. That's what real people who are fleeing for their lives think.
These people are not fleeing for their
Why
lives.
not?
You don't go, oh, I don't like France. I'm still
that-
not quite satisfied that I've escaped torture. I'll just go on this boat. And
I'm interested on how the British Secretary has herself said that Britain to be generous, and at the same time we are not taking nearly the same number that others are taking. So I'm not sure where we get this idea that we ought somehow to be exceptional, that other people would if you like, show the sympathy, show the empathy, do things with others, but we shouldn't. That seems an odd principle.
Well, you're changing your thing. You're now changing your whole point on why we should accept them now.
What do I change? And I've always said that if these are people, if they're not,
you're
then
sort of
that's
accepting they're not being tortured now, aren't
So
you?
let me just get this right. So Freedom
Not
from
being tortured in
Torture,
France.
your organisation, Freedom from Torture, okay, the organisation you are the director of policy for, you are advocating that people break the law and break into this country. That's what your charity does. Is that right?
We don't advocate break the law. Britain helped to shape a UN refugee convention.
Forget the UN.
I promise you I'm answering your
Forget
question.
the UN.
I promised I'm answering your question. So Britain helped to shape, okay, forget the UN. Britain helped to shape an agreement 70 years ago, realizing how bad were the failures of the 1930s, and said, what matters is not have you got a piece of paper before you arrive. It's absolutely explicit. The agreement that Britain helped shape was like, we need to work out, do people have a reason? Are they genuinely fleeing things which are really bad? We need to interrogate that,
Which they
and
aren't.
that's the bit. And if you're making a decision, the
Well,
British
unless
government,
if they've come
the
from
British
around,
government can make that decision because their decision making which itself
All right.
is problematic.
I
But
can
they
solve
do
this
that.
problem easily. This is the way we solve it because I have to take a break. We solve it by asking the France if we could rent a little bit of ground over there. We put together a holding station and people go there and explain why they think they should come to Britain. It's dead simple. They don't have to risk their lives in boats. They don't have to pay people traffickers thousands and thousands of pounds, and then we decide whether they have a legal reason or whether we would want them in this country, and they don't have to break in, because at the moment the people who are coming here in their boats landing on our shores are basically invaders,